So I'm looking at Chitubox. Now, what I've loaded, let me just get it in there. Hopefully you can see Chitubox, and I've put this on purpose to start with, because that's what you get when you first start using it. Oh, log in to get a 7-day free trial. I don't want to log. I don't want a 7-day free trial. The extra bits that you get for paying for it, you might like. I'm not going to use them. So if you get that screen, and that screen will come up almost every time you run it if you don't pay for it. So you just click the cross up the top here, and that goes into the normal screen, and you're away. So let me just close this one out the way, because I've got another version open, which I've got some stuff on. So what I'm looking at, just very simply, and we'll go into greater detail, this is a 4-wheel GWR coach I've done, which I think I've done on design on Fusion in the past, and this is it on the bed waiting to be printed. Now, I use auto supports more than anything else, and then I add extra ones. So as John Wood said, yes, I'll add extra ones on the corners. I use lightweight supports wherever possible, but I will use heavy ones on corners and when I want a good base. I also always use a raft. The first batch of wagons I done, which didn't have the curve but were flat, they were coal wagons, I printed directly on the bed. They worked fine, absolutely fine. But when you're using your scraper to get them off, you're damaging the edge of the wagon. So now with the raft on there, they're easy enough to get off. And you can see the amount of supports on there. I tend to use auto supports and then go through to add thicker ones and to even delete some. Now on this, I would go through and delete quite a few because I don't need them all. But you can see if I can... You can see how many there are in there. All of them will snap off. Don't worry about doing too many supports. But this was printed in one go. This particular coach went through a lot of iterations in getting it right, because originally I had the body and the chassis and the bits and pieces to go on it all separate and gluing everything together, and it drove me nuts. So then I came up with printing it in one go. Now this works out quite nicely in one go, but I should add what you've seen with John's picture earlier on, was he put it at an angle. And that's also something you may want to do. Now, an interesting note with this, I used to mount them at an angle, only about 30 degrees. And that was partly because then by going at an angle, it gave better support, I found, on the bed initially. But what I found, since using the heater, I can get away with just loading them in as it's loaded in here. And as I say, auto supports work very well. It goes red because it's moved off the bed. So what I've got here is two others which I've just got ready to talk about. Then let me just move that one out the way, and let's move that one in on the bed so we can see it a bit better. Whoops. Now this is one that's been done at an angle. And you can see the angle I've done it there at. Again, when I'm doing things like this, I try and make sure the supports are in places that don't matter. So on the underside, if there's little pimples left there from the support, it's not going to worry me or anybody else. But again, that was printed in one go. I don't know if I've talked about this in the past. The cart was all in Fusion. The horse was downloaded from Thingiverse as an STL, put into Fusion, some tidying up being done, and then put into print. And that actually printed out with no problems whatsoever. Now, talking of putting things on an angle, let's move that one out the way a minute and pull this lot in. Now you remember when I've said, I think in the past, that when I've done figures, I've done a figure, I then produced many figures from that by altering their size in Chitubox and mirror image them as well. So you can end up with 6 or 8 different, you know, the basic same figure but different sizes and mirror round. Now figures I always print upside down. And the reason for this is because if you look at it, when you've got legs like this, they don't need any support. Make sure you've got a decent support on the tip of the head. I was leaving the head out at first by just having, where are we? By just having these supports here and not doing the bottom one. And then I suddenly realised all my models were coming out with a flat head because this bit wasn't being printed properly. But you can see with this, and it's ideal with fingers because they don't need any support at all and they'll print out perfectly. So that's how I always do figures or anything else of that nature. Now you may say, well, why didn't I do the horse and cart like it? The reason why I didn't, because obviously the horse upside down would print out his legs better, but I didn't want to do that because I wanted to get all these wheels nice and tidy. So again, the orientation comes into it as to what it is you want to end up with. And you know, it's like putting support where you can on parts that don't matter and orientating it so you've got the best thing. And the other side of the coin with the wagon is that when I put this wagon at 30 degrees, it took about 4.5 hours to print. Whereas at this level, it only took 2 hours. Because of course you're printing more layers. On that score, you can see the big advantage here. I stack the plate as, but I'm saying this is not a stacked plate for me. I normally got more stuff on there because no matter how many pieces you've got on there, the time it takes is the time for the highest model because you're printing a layer at a time. Whereas with an FDM printer, if you put more than one model on the plate, it will take the time of the one model multiplied by the number of models. Whereas resin is the time for one model applies to all models because of the way it handles it. From the point of view of doing, let me just, I'll start with, let's get rid of some of this stuff and then we can, I'll bring this one back in again. And I'll go into the supports. Let me just go into auto support a minute and I'm going to clear all the supports. So that's the wagon without any supports at all. And I've lifted it up off the plate. As I say, this little talk is not meant to give you a good idea, but it shows you. So the first thing I would do, I would make sure I'm on light supports there, and I would use the auto mode to put them in. So auto support up there and apply. And it does a very good job. As I say, I will go up the end here, and what I might do then is to go into a middle of support and maybe you've got to go up to add supports. Where's it gone? Manual support. This is where this version of Chitubox gets a little bit confusing. So into manual support, choose the middle one, and then I would put a couple on this end in this way, just to add a little bit of strength on the edges to stop any warping occurring. If you want to delete them, then you've got to go up and choose the edit support, and then you can go down, and when they're green, you press the delete key. So it's the layout is the biggest problem. And I know when I first had this and I was contacting John because there was things I couldn't find. The other bit that's worth noting at this stage is if you go into manual or auto support, but particularly auto support, the other bit that's not, is worded differently to the original one, is this one here, contact point spacing. Now if I clear them all off, and let me increase that spacing to 10 millimeters, say, and apply. Can you see how I got far less supports now? So what we're saying is 10 millimeters is the spacing between the points of the support. So that's worth knowing, is that if you've got something where you need a lot of support on but not you know, close together, then play about with this by all means. If I clear it down and we go down then to 2 millimeters and apply, you can see we'll end up with a lot more support. Now, a lot of supports on this I would take away. From experience, I know I don't need 2 supports here. 1 is ample. So I would take every other one out. I think what I'm really finding is that with supports on resin, and although I'm using Chitubox, you have to, I use auto because it's quick, it gets them on there, it marks the area that needs to be done, but then you've got to edit it. For example, I take that support out of there and I take that support out of there because I know that degree of overhang works well with my resin printer. And for, is it, I forget who asked the question now, don't know whether it was, I think it was Paul or Richard. There's the springs there, look, that I'm doing on this one. Now what the red is showing there, the black line is showing that that's where I can put a support. The red bits are showing bits that they think I should be supporting. So I think the only thing I can say at this stage, and we will go into greater detail on supports at future meetings, is that when you're putting supports in, put them in, and I've actually, when I printed this, I've actually gone through and done a screen grab and printed it on the printer. So that then when I've finished the model, I can look at it and see where I might have some sagging or problems and have a look at what I've done with supports at that stage. It is worth doing because once you've got that knowledge under your belt, it becomes easier to get good results every time, rather than just crack on with them. I'll answer any questions that you might have on slicing, or try and answer them.